Hello everyone and welcome to game 2 of the match Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen. It's the weirdly placed chess called the Freestyle chess match Carlsen versus Caruana 2024. It's sort of a prelude to the World Chess Championship match between Ding and Gukesh. Also played in Singapore, and Fabi already lost game 1. It was a pretty impressive victory by Magnus, but now Fabi has white. Let's see how he does. And it's I already mentioned this a couple of times while covering Chess 960. It's hard to say, do you have like a bigger advantage with white in chess 960 or in normal chess? Because, okay, there you know theory, but so does the other guy. Here, it's, I don't know, maybe not knowing theory gives more advantage to white or less. Definitely something to discuss. Or maybe just white always has the advantage because of the, having the first move. But okay, let's check it out. Fabi opens with pawn to c4, sort of the official random English. We have pawn to c5, pawn to d4, pawn to d5, and pawn to c5. Immediately grabbing more space in the center, and from experience that it will come sort of be undermined by the b pawn later on. But okay, obviously there's a reason Fabi decided to do it. Pawn to h5, we have pawn to h4, knight f6, and pawn to g3. Pawn to g6 and knight to b3. Both were just nicely developing pieces. Knight to g4, Magnus hinting at a potential pawn to e5 breakthrough, and Fabi gets ready for it. Knight to d3. But Magnus doesn't play it, he just continues developing. Bishop to f5, we have pawn to f3, kicking away the knight, and knight to h6. We have bishop to g5 by Fabi, and knight to c7. We have castles queenside, and now knight to e6. Okay, again, it looks like a bit of a weird castle, but you've cleared everything you need to castle. The bishop is not in our way because we only needed these two squares, and there is nothing in between that prevents us from castling. So that's that's the those are the objectives you have to meet in order to castle. Knight to e6, putting pressure on Fabi's bishop, and Fabi brings it back. Bishop to d2. We have bishop captures on d3. Magnus parts with the light square bishop. Bishop captures, and now knight to f5. And here pawn to e3. So it seems like a very solid setup for Fabi. He's very flexible. He can he can choose to go e4, f4, g4, depending on what Magnus plays. And Magnus does try to break the pawn chain now with pawn to b6, and Fabi plays pawn to f4, which is the top move recommended by the engine. And you can see the situation on the clock pretty similar. We have knight to h6 and king to b1. We have knight to g4, improving the position of the knight, and queen to f3. We have queen to f6 and rook to c1 now. So getting ready for the c file to open up. We have b captures on c5, knight captures, and now rook captures on c5. Makes more sense than d captures because you also want to put pressure on that c6 pawn. Pawn to e5, threatening pawn to e4 to win material, and d captures on e5. And here looks like an interesting position where that queen on f3 is undefended. So maybe you could capture on e5, which is exactly what Magnus does. But what with? Do you capture with knight or with the bishop? Capturing with the knight is interesting, but it's really wild and complicated. Like queen e2, and now you can go queen e7 to attack the rook, pawn to a3. Best move for white. Now if you capture bishop to b4, will win you the queen, and now after, let's say, castles kingside, also a tricky castle, now you're going to bring the rook back. Now let's say knight captures, queen captures, let's say queen e4, and you trade queens, captures, something like bishop to b4. It's a really crazy position where white has to be preferred due to the better dark square bishop. This bishop sort of hemmed in, and the c-pawn is weak and the c-pawn will fall. So that's what happens if you capture with the knight. So Magnus captures with the bishop, gives up the other bishop as well, and now rook g to c1. That was the other option was rook to c2, just passively defending, but Fabi has to win, and he goes rook g to c1. Magnus accepts the challenge, and that is the only way to play. Bishop captures on b2, and now rook captures on c6. And here, basically, Fabi and Magnus are trying to decide who is the better engine. And now there is only one move that saves the game for Magnus. Otherwise, he's just, let's say you move the queen. Your queen is hanging. Let's say you play queen g7. All of a sudden, bishop b4 check. you move the king, bishop b5, and you resign. There's absolutely nothing you can do here. So Magnus plays the only move, knight to e5, attacks the queen and the rook. Remember, you still cannot capture because the queen would hang, and Fabi just trades queens because look at this, captures and the rook c7. How do you stop rook captures and f7? Well, there is a very particular motive, a very particular idea that Fabi missed here, or maybe he didn't, maybe he just, you know, saw it and then decided to play it. Rook captures on f6, knight captures on f3, king captures on b2, and now knight captures on d2, and rook to c7. So now, do you see it? What did Magnus play here, and what did Fabi potentially miss? Otherwise, Magnus would be just dead lost here. Have at it while I give you a couple of seconds. The move, of course, is castles. Very easy to miss when you're calculating, because I don't know if you know, when players are calculating down the line and they're so much used to calculating in regular chess, do they, you know, some 10 moves down the road when you're calculating, do you actually take these castles into consideration? Probably yes, but you know, you never know. So this is what Magnus plays, and now the f pawn is safe, and Fabi strikes with pawn to f5. He played it instantly, so chances are he did not miss the castles idea. Knight to e4, we have bishop captures, d captures, and f captures on g6, breaking through Magnus's defenses. Rook to d2 check by Magnus, we have king to c1, and rook to d3, going after the e3 pawn. Fabi captures on f7 with check, king g7, and rook to f4. Now ready to play pawn to g4 and try to put some pressure on Magnus's king. We have rook captures on e3, pawn to g4, h captures on g4, and rook captures on g4 with check. We have king to f6 and pawn to h5. So now Fabi has a passed pawn, and he's also up a pawn. So very dangerous for Magnus, and Magnus could easily make a mistake here. Rook to f3 is the only move that holds because, well, let's say you play something like rook to d3 and, you know, try to push the pawn this way. It's a matter of a simple rook g6 check, and then you go after the rook, and that's it. There's no defense here. So after h5, rook f3, only move for Magnus. Rook captures on e4, rook captures on f7. We have rook captures, king captures, and now rook to a4. Fabi is now up a pawn, but it's not going to be easy. You know that rook and pawn endgames are a draw, and even when you're up a pawn, most of them are still a draw. We have rook to c3 with check, king to d2, and rook to c7. Magnus defends the pawn, rook to a6, and now king to g7. We have king to d3, king to h7, and now, of course, Fabi starts pushing the passed a pawn forward. Not the passed a pawn, but the a pawn forward. Rook to f7, we have king to e4, and now rook to g7. There's nothing Magnus can do here other than wait and see, but by playing rook to g7, he actually blunders the game. But it's not easy to see why. Fabi missed it in the game, but do you see why? What can Fabi do to make this a winning position? Well, the thing is, it's already, everything is set up perfectly for him, and he has to play pawn to a5. And now the thing is, okay, there's not much that Magnus can do other than move the rook. Let's say rook f7, you will go king e5, and let's say rook g7, you will play rook f6, and now let's say you give a check, you will play king to d6, and now let's say rook to g7 or whatever, you will play pawn to a6. And now you have this pawn that is also ready to go forward, but your main idea is to either give up this pawn for a rook trade, or you will shift this rook over to b7, and then you will win the game. But it's not, I mean, although it seems straightforward, you still have to play this for like 40-45 moves in order to actually win this. Fabi played king to d5, and now Magnus goes rook to f7. We have rook to e6, rook to f4, and now pawn to a5. Fabi is now again winning, but this is easier said than done. Rook to f5 with check, we have rook to e5, and now rook to f6. And now, how would you win this position? It's a very, very tricky one where you have two options, and well, one leads into the other. If you go rook to e6, your opponent will just check you, you will go back, and then rook goes back to f6, and you will have to find rook to g5. But it's again, very, very difficult. I will show you because this is classical and it's really fun. The point is that after you play king to h6, there's rook to g6 check. And now once you trade, the position is winning. So you cannot play king to h6, and without king to h6, you don't really have all that many great moves. You will move the king all the way here. You push a6, and then you will again do the maneuver. You will go to b7, or that, or you will have to give up the pawn and rook for the rook, and then just win a nice king and pawn endgame. But here after rook f6, a rook to e7 check was played. Now comes king to g8, and again there is a way to win, but this one, I mean, what a position. Fabi played rook captures on a7. The move that actually wins is rook to e6. I'm going to show it to you because it's really tough to find this. Rook to f5, rook to e5, and now after rook to f6, you will go rook to g5 with check. This is the key idea. After the king moves, or you go to the h file, and then you're just locked on the h file forever. King e5, and after rook to h6, you will play rook to f5 with check. King g7. Now you play king to d5, and after rook a6, because there's really nothing Magnus can do here, king to c4, you will play something, let's say king to g8, or king to b4, and now after rook to h6, or really whatever, rook to c5, and now after king to f8, rook to c7. You will give up the pawn for the a7 pawn, and then of course your pass pawn is winning, or Magnus would more likely defend it, and then you go back, rook to c5, but now your pawn is on a6, and you will march the king over to the king side, defend the pawn, and then go, of course, after this pawn and win the game this way. So it's a lot of moves, but that was definitely the way to do it. Fabi played rook captures on a7, and with it, he basically resigned the match. Rook f5 by Magnus with check, king to c4, and now king to h8. Of course, getting the king out of the way. If you capture the pawn, rook captures on h4, then king to b4, and now the position is winning because the rook can freely move away from the pawn, and you can start advancing the pawn. So that would be a terrible mistake. So Magnus just played king to h8. Now we have pawn to a6, and now rook to f6. We have king to d4, rook to c6, and now king to e4. Rook to f6. Cutting off the king. We have king to e5, rook to c6, king to f5, and rook to b6. We have king to g5, rook to c6, king to f5, and rook to d6. King to e5, rook to c6, rook to a8 with check, and now king to h7. We have king to d5, and now rook to f6. So there is no good way for Fabi to push this for a win. King to c5, rook f5 check, king d6, rook f6 check, king to e7, and rook to c6. It doesn't even matter that Fabi now gets his king to the 7th rank. Rook a7 and king to h8. King f7, rook to b6, king e8, and rook to d6. Rook to a8, king h7, king to e7, and rook to c6. King e8, rook to d6, king e7, and rook to c6. We have king to d7 and rook to f6. We have pawn to h6. You have to push some pawns, otherwise it's just going to be a draw by a 50-move rule. Rook captures on h6, and now rook to a7, threatening some discoveries here. King to g8 and king to c7. Rook to f6, rook to a8 with check, and now king to g7. This was basically the last moment where Magnus could have made a mistake if he played something like king to f7 to, prevent the rook from coming to f8. And now after a7, you will be just winning. There's no way to control the back rank. But king to g7 was played, and now Fabi knows there is nothing he can do for Magnus to win this, for him to beat Magnus, and he goes rook to f8. He gives up his full rook, but it doesn't matter because it's a draw regardless of who plays what. Rook captures on f8, a7, rook to f7 check. We have king to b6, and Magnus grabs the pawn with the rook. King captures on a7, and we have the best kind of draw. It is a draw by insufficient material. So Magnus wins game 1. Fabi almost wins game 2, but not really. So Magnus wins the match. He is the winner of the freestyle chess match. Carlsen versus Caruana wins $60,000, and we don't get to see tie breaks or Armageddon being played, which is sad for us, but it's good for Magnus, I guess. Finishes a little bit early, and we will have a few days, before the start of the World Chess Championship match between Ding and Gukesh. I will make that video where I will go over everything and absolutely everything you guys discussed in the comments of my previous video. I will address that in that video, and hopefully we get a very nice start at the World Chess Championship. Very much looking forward to it. Hopefully you guys are as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Frank W.H. Schaefer, Jeffrey Johnson, Yusuf Evelyn, Dan McCormick, and David Gasparian for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. But we all know what else is happening in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.